So today we are going to discuss, as mentioned, Caroline Shaw's Partita for 8 voices. This is a piece that has fascinated me since its premiere and has followed me throughout a lot of my career, and I was very thankful to have the opportunity to use it as my research for my doctoral dissertation, which I'm hopefully defending soon. So it starts out like this. There's this idea of drawing a line from one point to another. It's a simple act, right? It begins, it connects, and it ends. And by connecting any 2 points, distant and unrelated objects can become one. In examining these connections, we are able to draw parallels to the past, find commonality in our present day, but also dream about what's possible in the future. On an April day in 2013, exactly 3:03 p.m. outside of Williamsburg in Brooklyn, composer Caroline Adelaide Shaw received a phone call from a friend, letting her know she had just won the Pulitzer Prize for music, and at 30 years old, she became the youngest winner in the prize's history. Not much was really known about her at all. In fact, when she won, most everyone in the musical community said, "Who?" But Partita presents a musical history of Shaw's life. Pretty much everything in her 30 years can be found within the work. The experiences that Shaw had in her career allowed her to draw parallels from these events and compose one of the most unique and inventive pieces in the modern day repertoire. It tells the story of Caroline Shaw. On the inside cover of the score, Caroline describes the basic architecture and material for the work. Partita is a simple piece, born of a love of surface and structure, of the human voice, of dancing and tired ligaments, of music, and of our basic desire to draw a line from one point to another. Based on this description, you might think, okay, simple piece. Simple, minimalistic, few items. You would be quite wrong. The 2013 Pulitzer Prize Committee had the following to say when awarding prize to Shaw. They said it was a highly polished and inventive a cappella work, uniquely embracing speech, whispers, sighs, murmurs, wordless melodies, and novel vocal effects. Although the jury and the composer described the piece in many different ways, they do seem to agree on this one central detail. The piece embodies a variety of influences. The title Partita is a genre. It's a collection of dance forms that were made popular in the Renaissance and Baroque eras. The 4 dance forms that Shaw includes in her work are an Allemande, a sarabande, a Courante, and a passacaglia. And while Shaw employs the forms of these titles, she titles in this way, she gives little other information as to why she titled them as such. This is kind of what drove me crazy, because I know the partitas of Bach, I know the partitas of the Baroque era. As you'll hear in a moment, this piece sounds nothing like a partita. Why does she call it a partita? Why did she decide to name the movements of a new work after seemingly antiquated dance forms? So in order to find the answer, I did have to begin looking into Shaw's past. The issue is uncovering her development as a composer and her compositional style leading up to Partita is wildly difficult. Shaw herself offers little help with this issue. Her professional biography highlights her work as a performer and collaborator, both with the American Contemporary Music Ensemble and also Roomful of Teeth, which is a group of 8 singers that she sings with and who she wrote Partita for and who premiered the work. She's also collaborated with a lot of people in pop culture: Kanye West, Pharrell, Beyonce, Jay-Z. The end of her personal biography on her website simply states this. Caroline Shaw loves the color yellow, avocados, otters, salted chocolate, kayaking, Beethoven Opus 74, Mozart opera, Kinhaven, the smell of rosemary, and the sound of the janky mandolin. It's not very helpful. So in order to reveal the inner workings of Shaw's compositional style and the compositional techniques used in Partita, I had to begin with Shaw's musical roots and then dig deep into the music of Bach and see where I could find these parallels and these commonalities. So this is how we today will begin to draw the line that leads us to the inner workings of this Pulitzer Prize winning work. So we're going to start with just a little bit of a brief biography about Shaw. She's born in 1982, Greenville, North Carolina. She studies the violin starting at 6 years old. And in 96 attends a program in Vermont at Kinhaven Music School, where she composes her first work, which she's called, it was very Brahmsian. She also says Kinhaven is where she learned that she wanted to be barefoot as often as possible. So in 2000, she enrolls at the Shepherd School of Music at Rice University, one of the most prestigious schools for undergraduate string training. There she studies, but she also performs in Gilbert and Sullivan musicals, light operas, and she also writes for the paper and explores other different options besides just music. And then in 2004, when she graduates, she gets awarded a Thomas J. Watson Fellowship. A Watson Fellowship, for those of you who don't know, is an opportunity to design what you want to study for a year outside of the country. A project you've always dreamed of that's a little bit outside of the box. Shaw wanted to write music, even though she really had not written much since this high school program in Kinhaven, but she also wanted to study landscape architecture and gardens. So her proposal was that she would write string quartets based on the aesthetic principles of formal garden design. Pretty normal. But Caroline Shaw is anything but normal. So she was primarily based in Paris, France during this year, but she visited a variety of gardens, including French formal gardens, English landscape gardens, and Italian Renaissance gardens. And while doing a lot of walking and thinking and meeting people, she was also composing. Much of what she learned during this time influenced her current compositional style. We're going to focus on English landscape gardens, because her attention was specifically drawn to a structure known as a folly. And I've put 3 up here on the screen here. These are these English landscape garden follies. These buildings are constructed primarily for decoration, to enhance and add to the garden and its design. Shaw describes these structures as fragments of a castle, a construct of something that wasn't there before, but instead a wistful longing of something from another time. It's more of a fake ruin. It's like just off there in the garden, off in the distance, a wisp of something prior. This is what Shaw really does in a lot of her music. She states that she puts a reference to music from another time, but then she spins it into something new and something modern and something that is original and unique. So although she worked on these string quartets, she didn't quite finish them during her Watson Fellowship. We'll get back to when she does here in a little bit. So after her year with the Watson Fellowship, she goes and pursues a master's in violin at the Yale School of Music. She started singing at Yale. She sang at Christ Church in New Haven, and they perform a lot of Renaissance music in plain chant. It's here she got to know the music of Thomas Tallis, William Byrd, and Josquin. And she starts to fall in love with the simple ways that these elegant lines intersect with one another, similar to what she was studying when she was looking at these gardens out in Europe. And she sees a thread that she thinks she might be able to connect. So she writes a piece based off a Tallis motet for one of her friends who plays the cello. This is her first musical folly and her experimental genre of pulling from something from the past. She graduates in 2007 and continues to find new avenues after finishing her degree at Yale. This is what's really interesting is she ends up accepting a job at Wesleyan University, where she's hired by the ballet department and the dance department to accompany works of ballet and of modern. And it's here that the teachers would say, we need a piece in the style of a gigue. We need a piece in the style of an Allemande. These dances all have specific meters. They have specific tempos. They were to reflect the hops and the jumps and the sprightly leaps that these Renaissance dances would embody. And so she would compose on the spot these dances. She'd say, what's the meter? What's the style? What's the form? And she would compose them. And then sometimes they would say, we need to do improvisational dancing. So you can do what you want, and you can react to what you see the dancers doing as well. So then she was working with this kind of free improvisational style. And it's here at Wesleyan that she says she composed probably over 100 pieces of music, and really was her training. Because reminder, at Rice and at Yale, she studied the violin. She didn't study composition. So her real first formal compositional training is here, accompanying these dance classes at Wesleyan University. She continues to perform with the Yale Baroque Ensemble, and she joins a choir at Trinity Wall Street, which is one of the best professional church choirs in the nation, under Julian Wagner. They programmed the Bach B minor Mass, and she says, I'm not good enough to sing this yet. So she goes, and she takes voice lessons from a woman named Jackie Horner-Quitink. She sings with a group called Anonymous 4, which you've maybe heard of before. Her association with Jackie and Anonymous 4 will come back, so hold that one also in the back of your mind. We'll connect these dots here in just a moment. Okay? So while she's singing at Trinity Wall Street, she ends up hearing that there's going to be auditions for a new music group called Roomful of Teeth, and they're going to mine the potential of the human voice. Brad Wells from Williams College forms this group, and they're not interested in being a normal choir. Instead, he wants to bring in people from all around the world to teach them unique vocal techniques, and then he also invites composers to come and write pieces for the 8 singers based on these vocal techniques. So they go out to the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art, and they sit amongst this art with these composers and these voice teachers, and they learn these new styles. And while they're there, Brad Wells, the conductor, says, and hey, if any of you 8 singers want to compose a little something for the group and try it out, you should feel free. So Caroline takes kind of the formulaic structures of a dance, the Passacaglia, and says, I'll try some things out, and I'll use some of these new inventive techniques. That's 2009. 2010, she goes back. She writes another little piece, a Courante. It's actually the longest one of the suite, but another experiment. She decides, hey, I think I like this composition thing. I'll apply to a PhD. She gets accepted to Princeton.
Wow.
She goes back to Mass MoCA for a 3rd summer. She writes 2 more movements, a sarabande and an allemande. And even though the pieces had never been performed together, they had been performed each summer. Roomful of Teeth puts out a CD, and they include all 4 movements. And she really believes in the mission of this group, so she says, I'm going to submit this piece for a Pulitzer Prize, because you can submit a piece. If it's been recorded and you've got the score, anybody can submit. She goes, and maybe, just maybe, it'll get some recognition for this group, Roomful of Teeth, that I really believe in. And then she gets a phone call at 3:03 outside of Williamsburg, and she won the Pulitzer Prize in music. And then a few months later, they're like, we should probably premiere the piece. So they premiered in New York at Le Poisson Rouge. And then a few months later, they win the Grammy Award for Best Chamber Music Ensemble Performance. All from some experiments at Mass MoCA. So, yeah, this is Roomful of Teeth. These are the 8 of them. It's not really your traditional choir. They sound a little bit different too. Let's listen to a little bit of the opening movement, Allemande. Sounds just like a Baroque piece, right? That's definitely an Allemande from a Partita, right? NPR, in reviewing the work, said, the sheer virtuosity and total joy in the sounds they produce are like the supernuminous lines floating over churning breaths in Courante, one of singer Caroline Shaw's Baroque structured compositions that we weave through the album like glittering threads. I'll tell you right now, it is this quote that drove me insane. Because I listened to this piece and I love it, clearly. I won't hide it. I love this piece of music. And this was before I had even started a doctorate. Baroque structured. What do you mean? How? All I hear is this noise and I love it. Well, the issue is the score is not published. Roomful of Teeth is performing it. They're using it to promote all these new works, all these new composers. So it's not available for just anyone to perform. It's also a highly specific work, as you hear, with all these vocal techniques that make your ears go, what?
Yes.
Right? So how do you, she's not ready to give that out to the public yet, but I'm sitting here dying. And so, I start to do some research and I say, well, I need to go back to Bach, because even though I've loved Bach, I never have played a partita. I'm a vocalist, I'm a pianist. I never had played any of the solo works. You may be familiar with his solo cello works. It's the famous on every car commercial. Okay, so he's got those for cello, and then he also has a set for the solo violin. So now that we know a little bit about Caroline, we need to put her to the side, and now we need to go to Bach for a moment, okay? Well, before Bach, we have to figure out what Bach was doing with these partitas, because the partita is complex. It's made up of a lot of different influences, and they grow like planted seeds throughout the history of music. So utilizing these forms, not only how does Shaw manipulate them, but you actually have to say how does Bach manipulate them. Because it turns out Bach is manipulating these dance forms as well. So before we get to Bach, we have to go to where they started, which is in the 16th century. So let's take a pretty far leap back. So the dance suite itself, again, is not a single genre. Each of the suite's movement is defined by distinct styles. These styles are then expressed musically by the composer in a way that evokes emotional characteristics that people would dance to for evening entertainment. So by scrutinizing the genesis of these forms, particularly in their first notated versions, both the choreography and the music, we can make informed decisions regarding tempo, articulation, and interpretation here today. That's why many people do degrees in historically informed performance, because they want to know exactly how to perform these old works. You have to acknowledge the countries of origin for this to work, because all of these dances came from a different place. France, Italy, Germany, Spain. And that's what they all were kind of codified into this suite, into a partita, kind of exhibiting the different stylistic characteristics of dances from these other countries. And they became pretty popular in Europe throughout, again, the 16th, 17th, and even 18th centuries. So one of the first manuals that you can find that's printed is by Fernand Arbeau, which is actually a nom de plume. And he wrote a treatise to accompany these dances. It's called Orchestrography. 1589, yes, that's right. So the dance, as you can see here, it combines the choreography with the music. A pas de gauche, a pigeon, and a pas de droit into 3 dance sequences. The simple, a gauche, the droit, and the gauche, the double. So the dance is to be executed in a light duple time. You see the cut circle, not half time. It's called cut circle at this point, but it means about the same. And you can find a similar dance in another Italian dance master, Cesare Negri, around 1604. Okay? So what I want you to see is that with this melody and with this rhythm, there's an actual choreography that goes with it. And this is how they were notating things back in that time period. Okay? So you see a meter and you see a style. You see rhythm. Long, short, short, long, short, short, long, short, short, long. You got the long, short, short, long? Okay, we're going to come back to it. Okay. This is a little bit clearer, maybe will make more sense to us here in the 21st century, but this is from Betsy Bang-Mather's Dance Rhythms in the French Baroque. And it shows the phrases that made up this melody. It's the same melody from Arbeau, just again a more modern notation. And you can see again the different tempos, the first strain versus the second strain, and you can see again the steps left and right that would go along with it. These are some of my favorite drawings that you can find in these dance manuals because it shows these dances, and this is actually the step pattern that they would follow. And this is how they would know how the dance goes. Again, usually they were dances in pairs, so it shows the difference. But then you can see the musical gestures that are supposed to accompany those hops, those jumps, those skips in the dance. And in fact, you can see that's for the sarabande, that's for a chacon, and this is for the passacaglia. So these are these Renaissance dances, and this is how these people would dance to them. If you're ever bored, go on YouTube and you can find people doing them. They're really interesting. We didn't have time to watch them today. Okay? I think these are really beautiful, though. They're really wonderful. Maybe you can't see them quite as much as I'd like for you to, but they're really wonderful, the intricate choreography that people would dance back then. Okay? So now that you know a little bit kind of where these dance forms come, we do talk about Bach. His solo instrumental works are some of the most fascinating in the standard solo repertoire, and that's due to a high level of difficulty, but paired with an abundance of analytical opportunities. So scholars and researchers are fascinated with Bach's music, still to this day. Analysis of the works tend to focus on interpretation, performance style, articulation, and phrasing. Bach was influenced, however, by multiple cultural influences in sound, which resulted in what scholars now refer to as the German mixed style. Or, for especially the master crowd folks in the room, the Geschmack der Geschmick. Oh, yeah. Yes, we're doing German this semester. So, the German mixed style is actually a combination of Italian-style short phrases and virtuosic melodies, paired with the French style of long phrases balanced within the dance melody. So this becomes the German style, is they put the two together. So you have German, you have French, you have Italian, and this is where Allemande, which actually translates to German, but then you have the French Courante, and then you have the Spanish Pasacai. So again, you're starting to see the geographical influences and how these composers absorbed the cultures around them and then put the music into their pieces. Regarding Bach's work and how it influenced her, Shaw states, Partita for 8 voices is tied to dance and dancers more than it is to Bach necessarily. Kind of a lie, I prove it. It is tied to the ideas of tension and release. But Bach is definitely in the background too. She says, Bach is deeply in my bones. She's right, because if you go look at her senior violin recital from Rice, she begins her program with Bach Partita No. 2 in D minor, the exact piece she bases her work off of. So she knew these works intimately, as anyone knows who's done a recital. However, you will notice she stays away from the chaconne, but we can also talk about that later if you want. But she does the Allemande, the Courante, and the Sarabande. Okay? She says, my partita parallels more closely with the partita in D minor, even on a basic level with regard to dances used and number of movements. The D minor partita is just one of the most gorgeous things ever written. I love the Allemande of it so much because it's just a single line. There are no chords, no harmony. And I love that Bach said, no, I'm just going to write this weird solo violin Allemande, which is not what you're supposed to do. But instead, he chose the form of a suite as a way to have a lot of fun writing music. At the same time, he made something so deeply profound, especially in the chaconne, but even in his Sarabande, which is also one of the most beautiful things that has ever been written. There's a simplicity in that project, a small celebration in the solo violin and cello suites that is something I've always admired. Okay, so Shaw sees Bach celebrating the dance. She sees him taking the basic tools and building blocks of these dance suites and then morphing it into something that works in his time and his era, and him having fun, which is not often seen in Bach because his music was serious and it was for the churches he was working with. But his partitas and sonatas for the solo instruments were really passion projects for the composer. They weren't necessarily commissions from other people. The Allemande in BW4 1000 contains notable parallels to the early dance genres in Bach's work, along with its own unique set of defining characteristics. As the Allemandes of old were the start of the night, they were processional dances. People would come into the ballroom to this dance. There was kind of an improvisational atmosphere along the way, with the tradition of an accented downbeat and a line existing within the dance characteristics of old. So this is kind of a funneled version of an Allemande. It's in duple meter, it has binary form, 2 different strains. There's 1 or more upbeats at the beginning of a piece or a pickup. And then there are cadences on downbeats, phrases of irregular length, again kind of this improvisational style, and the choreography includes a lot of steps and hops, okay? So that's kind of what we say the Allemande of a Renaissance era is. And J.S. Bach's partita, he's again taking this and putting it into his own unique manner. The dance forms evolved in the years leading up to Bach's composition and continued to develop after they were completed. But again, using the geographical influences of France, Italy, and Germany, Bach was able to expand upon these forms in new ways. The virtuosity in his writing for the solo instrument was a new evolution within the genre, but it was one that would become associated with the genre as it developed. Okay? So as mentioned by Shaw, the entire movement is created by a single melodic line for a solo instrument. Bach's composition for solo instruments often include broken chords to provide the song's sense of harmony. You'll see there's a short 16th note pickup at the beginning of the piece, which was traditional of the Italian Allemande. First, Bach includes irregular phrase endings, which continue on, something new in the Allemande, and it was traditional in the Allemandes of the past. Bach retains the 2 stresses per bar, with beats on 1 and 3 receiving the greatest stress. This is constant, not just within the first 2 measures, but throughout the entire movement. The influence from traditional Allemandes remains consistent as well. A caesura typically follows before the remaining 16th note resumes as a pickup into measure 2. And then Bach cements the piece in D minor by way of the F natural and the C sharp in the opening measure. Following a short descending passage, Bach leaps up to the major 6 of E natural, the 9th of the D minor scale. French performance practice usually interpreted this gesture as an expressive device, but it should occur without an accent. Bach incorporates tension and release in his Allemande by using specific pitches that lied outside of the D minor harmony. These pitches lead to new tonal areas within the movement. The first of these appears on a low G sharp in measure 7, which leads to E major, the secondary dominant, or A minor in the key of D minor. This harmonic event leaves the listener in anticipation until the A minor harmony is confirmed in the cadence in measure 8. Okay? So you see a little bit of what this piece looks like to Bach. And just, again, kind of just to summarize what I just said, he's incorporating these influences from these other countries. That you would have known, oh, that's French, oh, that's Italian, back in those days, okay? And I do want to point out, let me actually go back. Okay, this pickup beat of a 16th, short followed by long. Short followed by long. Okay? This is, again, just kind of showing the harmony of it. So that's a little bit behind Bach's Allemandes. Let's listen to BW4 1004, which maybe will sound a little bit more when you think of a partita, an Allemande from a partita. Here's just a little bit of the work, and you can follow along. Right? Maybe a little bit more what you're thinking. But you can hear the dance. You can hear the hops. You can hear, again, this Bach having fun. It's one of my favorite quotes that Caroline gave me in my interviews with her. Because you can hear him just having fun and writing this beautiful, simple line. The virtuosity of his writing for the solo instrument was new evolution, but one that again would become associated with the genre as it developed. The dance characteristics of old partitas go far beyond the first two measures of each movement in Bach's work. Instead, Bach continues the dance throughout, hopping and skipping, celebrating simple melodies, and composing music that would influence composers for years to come. Nadia Sirota, an important living violist, says, "Partita is a performer taking what she knows and making something beautiful with it." So this is where we begin to connect this line. We take her history, we take her past, we take the influences that she has in studying formal gardens and the violin and Bach, and then she also knows Bach well. She knows this partita well. And so when she starts composing this piece, she's simply just taking in what's around her. She's taking in her past, and she's taking in music that she loves, and then she's having fun, and she's celebrating it in her own way. Okay? So again, let's start looking at her Allemande. The first movement of any partita sets the musical landscape, just like we talked about. Caroline Shaw also chooses to begin her suite this way. It is important to remember that Allemande was the last one that Caroline wrote. She actually worked backwards unintentionally, but she had already written the other three movements when she wrote Allemande. So she chose to use this piece as kind of a catalog of techniques, a way to introduce everybody to all the different extended vocal techniques she would use within the work. She only uses one or two in most of the other movements. All of them can be found here. She often states that Allemande was written as a way to hint at Passacaglia. Overarching themes in the movement, forecasted by Shaw, include influences derived from the Renaissance forms, creative use of text, and again, the use of extended vocal techniques, including organic and almost chaotic material drawn from the environments that surrounded the composer, both leading up to and during the writing of Partita. Okay? So, as Cesare Negri, the Italian dance master, pointed out, the rhythmic pulse of the Allemande form, there's a use of short, short, long, the rhythmic ratio of 1-1-2. The rhythmic cell becomes commonly associated with the Renaissance Allemande. Composers often tended to use the short note as an anacrustic device to begin the movement. The pickup, again, is popular from the French style. As the form progressed, this opening rhythmic gesture became kind of the defining feature of any Allemande. So for Shaw, after she nests herself within the Allemandes of the past, almost like a garden folly, she then chooses to transform the ratio in her own unique way. The opening sequence of the text, to the side, is defined by two 16th note pickups as a pickup of bar 1, whose downbeat is a quarter note. The rhythmic gesture is repeated 4 times by the other voices in order to cement the ratio in the listener's ear. Okay? So this is it from the score. And notice, there's the pickup bar, duple time, moderate tempo, short, short, long. From the get-go, she's immediately identifying and solidifying herself within this Renaissance style. But think about this text. To the side and around, to the middle end. It goes on to say, Allemande left. What are those dance calls from? Square dancing. I'm from Alabama. I was actually homeschooled and we weren't allowed to have dances, but you know what we had? Square dances. When I first start listening to Partita and I hear a square dance call, I go, what? So here's another way she's updating the dance. This is a square dance call, rooted within a Renaissance and Baroque dance rhythm, short, short, long, with imitative sequences. In similar ways that Bach pushes the boundaries of the musical form, Shaw also explores these possibilities. One of the interesting parallels is the multiple styles and influences of the piece. Cultural and geographical influences from France, Italy, and Germany influenced Bach. So likewise, Shaw uses many extended vocal techniques, practices not typically found in Western vocal writing. The most notable and often used techniques include Inuit throat singing, Korean pansori, Georgian pitch stretching, Tuvan vocal practices, and yodeling. Shaw develops her own unique notation in order to describe these practices and includes a guide at the opening of the score which she labels a few notes on the less usual notes in the score. The many text sources can also be seen as another layer of influence derived from a variety of places and time. Allemande is the only movement that again includes all of these. Here in Allemande, Shaw presents us with the complete aural palette necessary in order to engage with Partita. Okay? So you're going to see the square dance with the Baroque dance parallels. The text, not only derived from square dances, is also derived from art. In Mass Mocha, it houses the largest presentation of artist Sol LeWitt. There's 3 stories of his large wall drawings. The other source of text for Shaw's piece, there are a lot of them, but the primary one comes from the instructions for Sol LeWitt's visual work. If you're not familiar with his artwork, Sol LeWitt actually just came up with instructions. And then other people would carry out the art and make it. This is one of his drawings down here, but I will tell you it's as long as the wall, probably from that brick all the way down to 2 more bricks down. It's massive. Okay? She also uses text from T.S. Eliot's Burnt Norton, the influences of Bach and the German Allemande. She also uses lines she found on Twitter. She's absorbing the world around her and the culture around her and putting it into her music, just like the Renaissance dance masters and just like Bach as well. Okay? Here, before I go back, this is a close-up look of one of his wall drawings, again, as big as I just pointed out. But the 10th point is located equidistant from the 9th point, the 3rd point in the midpoint of the top side. But if you follow his instructions, it creates this massive, massive, massive wall art and drawing. And this is what's surrounding Roomful of Teeth as they're beginning their experiments in their vocal style. Shaw takes, again, what's around her and incorporates it within her work. Okay? Another parallel I will mention pertains to the use of tension and how to build climactic moments. Bach builds tension towards structural cadences by using harmony and register, as his Partita is for a solo instrument. Bach reserves the uppermost register in order to signal these important events. Leading up to the final cadence, he first goes to a B flat, and then the next measure up to an A natural, and then even higher to the B natural, which is the highest pitch. So he's using register and he's using pitch in a way to put tension and release and climactic moments in it. Although Bach never indicates dynamics in the work, this is a natural crescendo that would have been known during these Baroque time periods. Similarly, Shaw also uses range organically, aiding in a way to signify important moments. One of the most climactic events in the piece happens where the first sung chord occurs, and Shaw begins a big crescendo, and she puts it in caps lock. It just says, all crescendo. And it leads to the forte entrance in measure 14, which is really exciting to hear. And although this idea of dynamics via register is not singular to Shaw and Bach, the way Shaw clearly reflects the composition of the device that Bach chose to incorporate in his Allemande, again, is showing her nodding back to the Allemandes of the past. So one of the final overarching ideas that I want to just go into before we listen again is her desire to, she said, organize chaos. When I asked her what the piece represents and how it represents the world around her, she had the following to share with me. She said, in Partita, I was asking myself, how do you create the sound written within your head and put it on the page and make it happen outside of yourself? Any composers in the room relate to that? Everything you're taking in, visual stimulus, people, internet, conversation, talking, how do you encapsulate that and then make something totally nonverbal out of it? This is the other reason she was really influenced by these Sol LeWitt drawings at Mass Mocha. She said, I found myself on breaks wandering over through the galleries, listening to what was around me, looking what was on the walls and what the artists were thinking about. I felt like they always suggest some sort of musical idea. And then the solo wit text appeared next to the paintings and something clicked. I loved his simple design aspect and his use of pencil. It looked like someone scribbling, which is how I do a lot of my own drawings, with a scribbly technique. And then in wall drawing 305, which again is this one right here, you can see the actual activity of making the painting in the painting itself. I was initially looking for a sense of talking and chaos, and I saw the wall drawings and it kind of just sounded like music to me. It sounds like chaotic conversation, a room full of people talking. So I had the group try speaking the text and then going into vocal fry, and then going into music, and it was the perfect representation of what music sounds like. End quote. So you can hear, again, if you think about the opening that we listened to a moment ago, this idea of people walking through an art gallery and talking, and how that conversation overlaps, but then how it comes together and creates something musical, something like a wall drawing. Okay? The first strain in her piece offers mostly phrases of 6 to 7 measures, which eventually organize into concrete harmonies. The first strain is mostly of 6 and 7 measures, irregular like Bach, but then the second strain, Shaw rounds these phrases out to 8 measures. Shaw juxtaposes this organization with more overlapping text and rhythm, some spoken, some sung. This momentary organization of congruent phrases then falls back into the asymmetrical lines at the recapitulation at the return. And it really is some of the most electrifying sounds I've ever experienced, just with kind of this inconsistency. So I'm going to skip forward to not far after I left us last time. And I want you to see if you can now kind of take all of these things you know about her absorbing the world around her, but also these rhythms of the Baroque era. So where am I skipping to? 215. I want to talk to you about one more movement in the Partita today, the Courante. Dances of the 17th century were often choreographed for 2 people, or for a pair. The 2 dancers executed carefully constructed choreography learned at an early age. These motions flowed seamlessly, one dancer responding to another's steps or mirroring them. The cultural influences from Italy and France influenced the choreography over time, but the idea of a pair of dancers remained constant within the form. We're able to see the cultural and historical influences from France and Italy in the rhythm, meter, and tempo. Rather than choosing between the French Courante style or the Italian Courante style of the Renaissance, Shaw draws from both in her choice of meter. Who was another composer that chose both French and Italian influences in their Partita? Bach. Shaw's Courante includes 2 time signatures, 3/2 and 6/4. By not definitively rooting herself in either metrical world, she allows herself flexibility to compose in different phrases. Shaw's tempo description, as you can see, speaks to the longer 3/2 passages, silk shoes gliding over marble mosaic. This indication harkens back to Negri's description of the dance and of the French Courante style. Negri in his manual says the latter dance, the French Courante, was slower in tempo and in contrast to its 16th century namesake, displayed smooth gliding steps. Caroline swears she's never looked at orchesography. I think she's lying. When I asked Shaw about the tempo description and what made her describe it, since she hadn't familiarized herself with that dance manual, she said, "That's what I wanted it to sound like. Louis XIV was in many ways the beginning of ballet. This time makes me picture a really smooth, cold, elegant, beautiful floor with colored silk, super soft slippers, gently sweeping over it. Whether it's French or almost like a Japanese silk kind of feel. The going between the duple and triple meter has this super smooth quality, unlike Allemande, which is rigid, square, and smooth." I want to do a quick sidebar. This is literally her on the phone with me, and she was pouring phrases out like that. Listen to the alliteration. Super soft slippers gently sweeping over it. I'm like, who talks like this? The youngest winner of the Pulitzer Prize does. Okay? So one of the people they brought in was a woman named Akinze Suvaparik, and she brought the cultural vocal influence from where she's from in Quebec. Along with Evie Mark, the 2 women taught the ensemble something called an Inuit vocal game, which is an abstracted form of what's called katajak, and it's the primary musical genre of the Inuit culture. Shaw was inspired by these particular sounds and incorporated it as a primary source material for Courante. She shares the Inuit vocal gesture among small groups of singers, just like 2 dancers, throughout the piece. The breath noises that are produced are intimate, shared closely between the 2 participants. The game is not meant to be one for performance for an audience, but it's intended to be an experience between two people, such as a dance. Let me show you a video of what it's actually like within the Inuit culture. These are two very young girls being taught a dance, early age, like they did in the Courante. And this is actually a performance or showing of the dance at the inauguration of Justin Trudeau in Canada. Get ready. Pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
So I asked Shaw what she thought about style, since this feels like a very important style. And she said, when I think of the word style, I think of it as something on the surface. But also style could be something underneath, part of a larger structure. Usually you can hear style on the surface. What are the ornaments? What is the general tempo or vibe? Kind of like how someone dresses. It's their style. It's their surface. But you don't see everything. It's maybe a symptom of what's underneath. But it's hard to say. This is how Shaw notates the opening of her Courante. Let's listen to a little bit of it. Hear the influence of the style?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is how she starts. That's the first strain. The second strain, because remember Courantes are two parts, and she's got to have two parts, begins with a wordless rendition of a piece called The Shining Shore. It's a shape note tune by George F. Root. Shaw would have been familiar with his music growing up in North Carolina, as I was, because I learned to sing music via shape notes in Alabama. I really love this piece. The shape note hymn, composed in 1855, was on a CD by a group called Anonymous 4, her teacher, Jackie Horner-Quieting. And she learns about this piece while studying with Jackie. I asked her why she decided to use this melody as the style, the basics, for the second strain. She said, I love the sound of the brightness in shape note singing. I love all these old folk songs. There's something about a moment in Courante where I wanted things to settle and to feel warm and comfortable and soothing. So I settled on The Shining Shore. I was also interested in an anecdote to the feeling that comes in the first strain, what we just heard, compared to the shape note song. When we were trying the breathing, exhale and inhale, which is related to Inuit vocal tradition, the guys were like, this sounds funny, because it has this kind of sexual sound to it. So I thought to myself, what if you get to that point you just want to shut it all off? I decided I'm going to take you to church for a moment. No one really knows that, but it's my funny little take on I'm going to take you to church, and then we're going to say goodbye church. We're going to combine church with this Inuit vocal sound. So we're going to listen to a little bit of the original Anonymous 4, singing the hymn. Then I'm going to take you into Partita, where you'll hear the wordless form. And then you'll hear the moment, you can't miss it, when she says goodbye church. And she takes these two different styles and makes them nothing but uniquely Caroline Shaw. Here's just a little bit of the hymn. So you notice for 4 sopranos and altos. So now I jump you to 3 minutes into Shaw's Courante with 4 soprano and altos. That's the same harmonic progression of The Shining Shore, just infused with a little Inuit vocal game. Caroline Shaw's career post-Partita has been pretty crazy. Zachary Wolf in the New York Times says, she changes gears so quickly and so easily at every turn. It's so unexpected and so full of joy. And it's in such a convincing and cohesive manner that you could never doubt the sense of architecture, like a garden, and the sense of premeditation. Justin Davidson of the New York Magazine said, you can hear in the luminous, sensual clarity of her sound that Shaw's not interested in faded ideological oppositions, agonized self-expression versus deadpan austerity, the embrace of the past versus the principled rejection of history. These are the battles of old men. Instead, she has discovered a load of the rarest commodity in contemporary music, joy. Slightly problematic there at the end, but you're seeing you can't hear her music and not feel the joy, feel her having fun with the music. She said, it's as much of myself as I could possibly put into something. And I think when you think about all the cultural influences, her violin career, her career as a singer, her time over in Europe, but also her experience with Bach, her experience with Roomful of Teeth, her experience with her voice teacher, her experience from North Carolina, her experience at Wesleyan, it's hard to challenge her on it. It's led to a lot of different collaborations. A lot of artists are really intrigued by her music. Here's just a couple quick examples. The artist Pharrell in the release of his clothing line for Chanel, featuring the Brooklyn Youth Chorus. You can find the same piece on Beyonce and Jay-Z's On the Run tour from last year in one of their video montages. Kanye West took her as one of the 4 musicians on his Life of Pablo tour because he's fascinated by her genius. Caroline says she doesn't collaborate with him anymore, but she was the producer for a number of his tracks on the CD Life of Pablo, and even performed at a couple of his concerts. Here's Shaw in the bottom left corner. Because what West asked her to do was to take his old song and make something new out of it and remix it. And you can find multiple Caroline Shaw remixes or productions of his pieces, because even Kanye said, I want you to do with my music what you did with Bach's. Because it's pretty amazing what happens. We don't have time to do more examples, but there are more. Or you can just watch Hulu, because she's the featured composer and her music's the featured composition within the 3rd season of Mozart in the Jungle.
I love that.
Yeah. So I think people say sometimes, what's the future of choral music and where are we headed with new music, and is it all atonal and weird, which I love. And I say no, and I say, well, I'm not hearing this in the concert hall, and so I usually say, well, you're looking in the wrong spot. Because instead, this is where it's happening, and this is where the joyous, creative, exciting music is coming, I think, here in the 21st century. Shaw came, and Roomful of Teeth came and performed the entire Partita for the high school students I taught up in Massachusetts. That's where I first got to meet her and where I first got connected with her. You can find this video on YouTube. I can send it out if you want. You can watch a little 1-minute clip of them working with us and teaching us the Inuit vocal game and how you exchange that music between 2 people. Shaw's dance is a joyous dance. It's full of life, it's full of patterns, and it's full of associations, and most excitingly, it has only just begun. Thank you.
We have just a few moments. Are there any questions that you would not be shamed?
Judy.
Yeah, what is she doing now? Where is she and what is she?
Her, I think, next premiere is with the New York Philharmonic. She was one of 19 women composed to celebrate the, I think it's the centennial of the women's voting rights. So there were 19 for this back in 2019, but they're doing it. So she's the New York Philharmonic. Baltimore Symphony has recently premiered a piece of hers, but she still performs with Roomful of Teeth. This is still their kind of calling card. The score is still not published, but I have it here if you want to look at it. And she's very busy. She is in demand. She's taking compositions that interest her. She still writes for Roomful of Teeth. New York Phil, again, has commissioned her for this new work. But then they're also performing an opera in New Zealand, I think, next week. So she's still finding a really cool way to balance her career as a performer, but also as well as a composer. She is one of the most down-to-earth people. I mean, she was really gracious. She gave me as much access as I really needed to her and to her music, and would take my phone calls whenever I said, I have questions. So I'm really impressed with her just as a human. And she's pretty simple, and following her on Instagram is really fun. She's fascinated with finding the perfect way to boil a soft-boiled egg, and she tries different movements of different classical pieces by Mozart and Beethoven to see which one gives her the best. So she'll show you what piece of music she used, and then shows you what the egg looks like afterwards. She's really cool. But she's got some of the most high-profile commissions, really, of all organizations, including Conspirare in Austin, Texas next year.
Wow.
Henry.
When she slips into her notated pitch writing, do you find her dominant style that permeates everything?
She loves this one specific harmonic sequence. It permeates Partita, but also almost all of her other works. And it functions like the circle of fifths, but right before she finds her completion, she pivots via the third and starts circling via the thirds. And so she loves this tonal sense of harmony that she found, especially in Renaissance writing, but she finds her own ways to twist it in ways that simply don't make sense. She finished those string quartets, and they became the album that just came out last year with the Attacca Quartet. It won the Grammy Award 2 weekends ago for Best Small Chamber Ensemble Performance. But you can find her still nesting herself in Ravel in Haydn string quartets, and then spinning it again into her own fascinating way. But she does that harmonic sequence over and over and over again. It's kind of her calling card because she loves this idea of tonality, but she loves doing it in ways that don't make sense. She also wrote a song for Sophie Van Otter, and for that string quartet, responding to the lyrics of Billy Joel's And So It Goes. And it's really amazing. The song just sounds awesome. A lot of people who don't enjoy classical music have been posting about it. What she does melodically and harmonically has made me and any other composer that listens to it go, what? Like, she moves from tonal area to tonal area in ways that just don't make sense, but a normal listener who doesn't understand music theory thinks it sounds perfectly normal. So I encourage you to go find that video. It's called So It Goes with the Attacker Quartet. Chris?
I felt like the Allemande, was that what we listened to first?
Yep.
Felt like there was a connection between, I guess I'm asking, is there a connection between that and Philip Glass's Einstein on the Beach? It felt like there was some really similarities in the way that it was struck.
It's very hard to put her in a box. Some people try to, and then pretty quickly she can prove you wrong with some other piece. But there's no doubt that this minimalism permeates. She did her master's at Yale. She interacted with David Lang a lot and sang a lot of David Lang's music. You can find her on a lot of David Lang's recordings. And so even though she probably would never want to be associated with the minimalist camp, the influence of David Lang is impossible to not hear to an extent. And that's due to her close affiliation with Yale. And that's where David Lang teaches, is at Yale. Bill?
Does she use that vocal bending in all of her pieces, or a lot of them?
She learned all those techniques here in Partita, and yes, she continues to use them in a lot of her work. One of the reasons she won the Pulitzer is the really cool way she notates a lot of that. And so that notational device is another one of her calling cards that kind of uniquely defines her music. A lot of people have had some good discussion about is that cultural appropriation, taking someone else's music and infusing it into the white American sound. But they try to counteract that with saying, no, because we bring these people in and they've taught us this and they've shared this with us, and now I'm trying to share this on a much larger and broader scale. So yes, almost in all of her pieces, especially with the voice, you can find it, but even in the string quartets, it's pretty awesome. Judy.
I noticed in that one area, it almost sounded like the Australian, the didgeridoo, the sound of the two voices where you can, I can't think what you call that.
Overtone singing.
Overtone, it
Yes.
sounded like that was in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of overtone singing. That's actually, it's a derivative out of that tube and throat singing style. The game is just one thing. And I've seen Roomful of Teeth perform, I think, 4 times now, and it is just so cool to see these very normal dressed human beings sit there and just go, I mean, like, it's wild what they do with their voices. But I mean, a lot of those low growls and stuff are actually the sopranos. And the 2 basses can do basically circular breathing of overtone where they change the top pitch while sustaining a fundamental. There's a piece on their second album, Render, that it goes on for about 5 minutes. Non-stop overtone singing. Tony?
Does this hurt your regular singing when you're doing the
Not
throat
because
stuff?
they learn it from teachers who know how to teach it healthy. And this is
Okay.
another reason she's wary to put the piece out, because yes, very quickly, these extended vocal techniques can tear it up if you don't learn it right. That was Brad Wells' mission in founding Roomful of Teeth, was he wanted to mine the potential of the human voice in a healthy way. These singers are teachers at San Francisco Conservatory, Lawrence Conservatory in Kansas City. They have really amazing careers. They come together for a portion of the year and tour and premiere these works, and they do it every single day with no problem. Estely Gomez, the soprano of the group, just sang with Renee Fleming at the New York Philharmonic this whole weekend. She's on a program with them.
Wow.
And she does Roomful of Teeth before and after that. I think, are we out of time? One more question, and then if you have more, I'm clearly happy to sit here and talk to you. Henry.
I found fascinating in the Allemande, for instance, the smooth, seamless transition between the speaking to the pitch, and how it surprised me, again, as to listen, again, of, oh, now we're into notated pitch. And there was this transition that happened along the way. Do you have anything you can observe about that and offer?
a lot of things, as you'll know in composition, are based around the idea of pacing a work and how you grow from one area to the next. And that's what I think a lot of, especially composers in the academy, really appreciate about her music, is how she paces these transitions, and they aren't seamless. This is what Bach does in his opening Allemande, is he has two ideas of eighth notes and triplets. And you don't really quite realize which one he's going back and forth between, but there are only 4 measures in the entire Allemande that he's not using one of those devices. So I think she's inspired by the way he seamlessly weaves his way through 2 rhythmic patterns, and then she just decides to do that as a way of taking the solo wit, but also with the voices that she was hearing and seamlessly combining them. I think it has to do with her unique innate ability to pace something. But I mean, here's the deal. She won the Pulitzer only after 1 year of her PhD at Princeton. Right? This is innate, this is who she is, this is natural, and this is just one of the things she's really good at and nobody taught her. And that's why a lot of people, I think, are trying to emulate her style and no one's being successful with it. This music is uniquely hers and it's going to be hers for a long time to come. Great questions. I'm happy to take more up here and show you some of the score if you have time. Thank you so much.